The blue and red lights appear in the rearview mirror almost silently. At first, it's just a flicker of color against the darkness of the road, a passing reflection, something you barely notice. But then it becomes clearer. The lights stay behind you. They follow every turn of your steering wheel. And suddenly, in a moment that millions of drivers experience every year, you realize something important. A police officer has just run your license plate. Most people imagine that moment as something simple. Maybe they think the officer just checks who owns the car. Maybe they believe the officer only sees whether the car is stolen or not. Some drivers assume nothing really happens at all, that the officer just glances at a screen and moves on. But the truth is far more complex than most people realize. Behind that quick plate check is an entire digital system connecting law enforcement databases, vehicle registration records, insurance data, criminal warrants, and sometimes even alerts related to public safety investigations. And it all happens in seconds. So here's a question for you before we go any further. If a police officer runs your license plate while you're driving down the road tonight, what exactly do you think appears on their screen? Is it just your name? Is it your driving record? Or is it something much deeper than that? Take a moment and think about it. And if you've ever been pulled over before, or if you've ever wondered what police actually see when they check a license plate, share your experience in the comments. Because by the time this story unfolds, you may look at that moment in your rearview mirror very differently. To understand what actually happens when a police officer runs a license plate, we have to start with something that most drivers never think about: the invisible network that connects every vehicle on the road to a vast system of public records. Every car on the road carries a license plate, and that plate is more than just a piece of metal with numbers and letters stamped into it. Legally speaking, it functions as an identifier tied to official registration records maintained by government agencies. In most places, that information is stored by departments responsible for vehicle registration and driver licensing. When an officer enters a license plate into their patrol car computer, or when an automated system scans that plate, the request is typically sent to databases connected through law enforcement communication systems. In the United States, for example, officers often access information through systems connected to the National Crime Information Center, commonly known as NCIC, as well as state-level motor vehicle databases. Within seconds, those systems return information related to the vehicle. But what exactly appears? First, officers usually see basic registration details. The system confirms whether the vehicle is currently registered and whether the registration is valid. It also identifies the make, model, year, and color associated with that plate number. This might sound simple, but even this basic information can be extremely important. If the plate returns a record for a blue sedan, but the officer is looking at a black pickup truck, something immediately looks wrong. That mismatch alone can signal that the plate may not belong to the vehicle, and that kind of mismatch often triggers further investigation. But registration data is only the beginning. The system may also show the registered owner of the vehicle. This usually includes the owner's name and sometimes the address associated with the registration record. However, it's important to understand something many people misunderstand about this process. When officers run a license plate, the system does not necessarily tell them who is driving the vehicle at that moment. It simply identifies who the vehicle is registered to. That distinction matters a great deal, because in many situations, the person driving the car may not be the registered owner at all. It could be a family member, a friend, a coworker, or someone who borrowed the vehicle. So while the plate check identifies the registered owner, it does not confirm the identity of the driver. But the system can reveal other things that influence an officer's decisions. One of the most common pieces of information that may appear is the vehicle's registration status. If the registration has expired, the officer will see that. In many jurisdictions, driving with expired registration can legally justify a traffic stop. The system may also show whether the vehicle has been reported stolen. If a plate check returns a stolen vehicle alert, the situation changes instantly. What might have started as a routine observation suddenly becomes a high-risk scenario. Officers are trained to approach stolen vehicle stops with caution because stolen vehicles are sometimes connected to other crimes. But there are other alerts that can appear as well. Some vehicles carry special notifications attached to their registration records. These alerts might relate to unpaid parking tickets, suspended registration due to insurance issues, or administrative flags placed by authorities. In certain cases, the system may also display information about the registered owner that could affect officer safety. For example, if the owner has outstanding warrants or is flagged in connection with previous law enforcement encounters, that information may appear in related database searches. However, it's important to clarify something here. A license plate check itself does not automatically give officers a full criminal history of the registered owner. Accessing deeper criminal records typically requires additional database queries. But if the registered owner is linked to an active warrant or a major law enforcement alert, the system may highlight that connection. And that's one reason officers sometimes run license plates even when a driver has not committed any obvious traffic violation, because plate checks can reveal information that officers would otherwise have no way of knowing. In many police departments, running plates is considered a routine part of patrol work. Officers often run plates on vehicles they encounter while driving, especially late at night or in areas where they are monitoring suspicious activity. Sometimes the reason is simply curiosity combined with professional awareness. Sometimes it's because the vehicle is behaving unusually. Sometimes it's because the officer notices a minor detail. Maybe the car is parked in a location that seems unusual for that time of night. But in many cases, there is no specific suspicion at all. It is simply part of routine patrol. And that brings us to another important part of this story: automated license plate readers. In recent years, many police departments have adopted technology that can scan license plates automatically as officers drive past vehicles on the road. These systems use cameras mounted on patrol cars or fixed locations like highway overpasses or traffic poles. As vehicles pass through the camera's field of view, the system captures images of license plates and converts them into digital text using optical character recognition. Then the system automatically compares those plate numbers against databases. All of this happens in real time. If a plate matches a record associated with a stolen vehicle, a wanted suspect, or certain law enforcement alerts, the system sends an immediate notification to officers. This technology allows officers to check hundreds or even thousands of plates during a single patrol shift, far more than a human officer could manually type into a computer. But this technology has also raised important questions about privacy and data storage. In some regions, license plate reader systems store the time and location where plates were scanned. Over time, that data can create a record of where a particular vehicle has been observed. Supporters argue that this data can help solve serious crimes, including vehicle theft, kidnapping, and violent offenses. Critics argue that large-scale collection of location data raises concerns about surveillance and personal privacy. Courts and lawmakers in different jurisdictions have debated how these systems should be regulated, but regardless of those debates, the technology continues to expand, and that means license plate checks are becoming more common, not less. Now imagine something for a moment. You are driving down a quiet highway at night. You haven't broken any traffic laws. You are simply traveling home after a long day. A patrol car passes in the opposite direction. For a split second, the officer's camera system scans your license plate automatically. Within a fraction of a second, your vehicle registration is checked against multiple databases. If everything is normal, nothing happens. The officer continues driving. You never even know the check occurred. But if something unusual appears in that database response, the situation can change very quickly. And that leads to another question worth thinking about. If an officer runs your license plate and something unexpected appears in the system, even something as simple as an expired registration, what do you think happens next? Some drivers assume the officer must immediately stop the vehicle, but that is not always the case. Officers often make decisions based on context. For example, if the system shows that the vehicle's registration expired recently, the officer may choose to ignore it or simply observe the vehicle for a while before deciding whether a stop is appropriate. In other cases, if the alert involves a serious issue, such as a stolen vehicle report, the officer will usually request backup before attempting a stop. Police training emphasizes safety in these situations because stolen vehicles can sometimes be connected to dangerous circumstances. But what about the legal side of running license plates? Is it actually legal for police officers to run a license plate without any specific reason? This question has been addressed in courts many times. In general, courts have ruled that license plates displayed on vehicles are visible in public spaces. Because they are openly visible identifiers, law enforcement officers are generally allowed to check them using databases available to police. This principle has been recognized in multiple legal decisions across different jurisdictions. In simple terms, when a vehicle is traveling on a public road, the license plate is not considered private information in the same way that the interior of a vehicle might be. It is intended to identify the vehicle, and that means officers are typically allowed to check it. However, how that information is used afterward can become more complicated. For example, if a plate check reveals no problems at all, that alone generally does not justify a traffic stop. Officers usually need some legal reason to stop a vehicle, such as a traffic violation or a specific alert from the database. This legal balance exists to protect both public safety and individual rights. And understanding that balance can help drivers understand why certain traffic stops happen the way they do, because sometimes when those lights appear in the mirror, the reason for the stop began long before the driver even noticed the patrol car. It began with a simple string of letters and numbers, the license plate. A small piece of metal that most drivers rarely think about. Yet in the world of modern policing, it connects every vehicle to a network of information that operates quietly behind the scenes. So the next time you see those flashing lights in your rearview mirror, remember something. before the officer ever approached your window, before the first question was asked, there is a good chance that your license plate had already told part of the story. And maybe the most important question of all is this. Now that you understand what can appear when police run a license plate, do you think most drivers actually realize how much information is connected to that one small plate on the back of their car? Share your thoughts in the comments. Because sometimes the smallest details on the road reveal the biggest systems operating behind the scenes.